Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Really appreciate it. This is the last of our Insight into Games month sessions. I think it's number 20 altogether for this year. So really pleased with how everything's been going this month. I'm delighted to be joined by Kenny from Feel for Music and Barney here from Supermassive. Kenny, I'm going to hand straight over to you, but before I do, if anyone has any questions or thoughts or comments during this really interesting discussion and session, please do pop them in the chat and we will address them throughout or sprinkle them in at the end. So yeah, Kenny, without further ado, I'm going to introduce yourself.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Leo. I appreciate that. And thanks for having us on board as well. So I'm here today with the wonderful Barney Pratt, as you've been introduced as well, Order Director of Supermassive, talking about Directive 8020. And we've sectioned this out into 4 different parts, but at the same time, this is going to be more like a fireside conversation. That's the way that I was going to be looking at it. So it's going to be nice and chill. We've got some bits to show everyone as well, which is really exciting. But the way we're going to section it out is we'll first talk about the concept stage of Directive 8020, talking about how do we turn this creative brief into a music strategy. Then we're going to look about how that we built a cohesive sonic identity using that information, and some of the resulting aspects of that too. Is probably going to be the largest section because we've got some bits to show you as well for that side of things, which is cool. And then with a little bit towards the end, I was going to give Barney some time to talk about the interactive music systems, about how he's sort of put that into application as well. And if we also have time as well for me to talk about the licensing framework and some of the troubleshooting elements that we would be trying to navigate around, even from the early days, and tips and tricks to find a way through. But at any point in time, if anyone has any questions, literally just chuck it in the chat. And I was thinking that as we just go through, if there's anything that we think's relevant at the time, we'll answer it right there. But if there's anything that we think that we're going to talk about later on, then we'll just wait until then. If that makes sense. So excuse me if we don't come back to everything, because we might be mid sort of thought pattern. So
Let's throw
Barney,
it in, and we'll keep it as informal as possible. I think
yeah,
that's the plan,
yeah,
isn't it? Yeah.
that is the plan. So I mean, to start off, Barney, I mean, um, firstly, thanks for having us on board and thanks for joining. But
Thanks for
section
organising.
one that we've got here is talking about that creative brief and that concept and the original story, and where Directive 8020 came from, and what that creative brief really looked like from the early doors, and how that you found this need to think that music was going to be a big component of that. And I'd be really interested to hear your take on all of that.
Yeah. Okay. So we this is the first sci-fi horror we've done. We've done a bunch of other different kind of epochs, different eras for horror. And we started off this whole hunt with okay, this is set in year 2500, so we're 500 years ahead from now. And what people will be listening to then? And we started off with a slightly too grandiose kind of plan to have kind of future pop. What is future pop? I think it's before we started talking. Actually, you might not know this side of it, but so we kind of got tied up in knots a little bit around what that might be, and the kind of closest comparison was something like Fifth Element, where the kind of whale song, high society kind of orchestral performance was this kind of super clean, super clear, kind of wavy kind of synth stuff. And it just didn't fit the narrative at all. As soon as we kind of put our feet back on the ground, it was like it was far from what we needed. So we started in kind of really the wrong place.
I didn't know that, by the way. I had no idea.
No,
That's
no, I
great.
know. Just
This is great to have a proper like retrospective on all the stuff that we were speaking about, because obviously we've sort of seen different things. So
yeah, it's kind of a debrief in some ways, isn't it?
yeah,
It's like
yeah, it is totally, and it's probably needed after everything as well, because there's a lot of moving parts. So it's great.
yeah, yeah. So we no, and then we went in we went a number of different directions. We put our feet back on the ground and we kind of said, okay, actually, we're not future, we're future now. So we wanted kind of accessible tracks that would also be that players would kind of associate with the in-game characters, because a lot of the usage of the tracks is kind of in-game characters listening to this music themselves, which during some early previous work was hilarious when we were trying out kind of gangster rap, and we're kind of like, okay, no, it's definitely not gangster rap. These characters are clean cut scientists. They, even when they're chilling out, they're not in the gangster rap hip hop zone. So we discount a lot of a lot of theories. But the first thing, so in terms of the process, trying to figure this out, because we were so wide at this stage, I put it out to the entire audio team, and this is what I do a lot actually, is for something this kind of to go this wide on. So we say, right, okay, look, we got half an hour or an hour. I want you to send me back a bunch of track names, and then we'll just previs them in the situation. So we'll take an example from game, we'll previs a bunch of tracks, and we just had some wild suggestions. But what was great was it started pinning down what we kind of didn't want. And the reasons why a lot of these weren't working was they were kind of too era specific. Like with the kind of future, we went to synthwave quite quickly, and realized that that's just too 80s. You know, we don't want to be overtly retro. So we wanted sort of tracks that were not too hard into a style, were kind of accessible. You could argue a lot of the tracks we chose were kind of indie pop, that kind of accessible nature, but with lyrics that could subvert and kind of fit the narrative. And then some other key elements that I remember we took this original work from the team, and then I started doing a deep dive into anywhere and everywhere, going down rabbit holes of Spotify, YouTube, etc. And getting tracks I thought would work, sticking them in the previs, finding out that they didn't, and the reasons why they didn't were kind of becoming quite clear. Key themes that didn't fit the narrative. A lot of tracks had themes such as love and lust, and they're not core themes of our game. So as soon as a track would say, because I love you, or some kind of lyric around that, it just broke the spell. So we had to remove a bunch, for that reason. There was also a lot of fantastic music, but it could be like too urban, perhaps, talking about streets and kind of a lot of that kind of growing up in an urban environment. Again, that wasn't a key theme of what we had, so we had to remove a bunch of music there. We sort of started centering around, there's gonna be a lot of spoilers in this, but because of course a lot of the characters, a lot of them are clones. And they're kind of in an abusive relationship with a corporate entity, and they don't realize it, or they maybe do at some point in time. But music tracks with lyrics centered around kind of abusive relationships were really kind of quite strong in terms of helping tell the story and offer that kind of foreshadowing across the narrative. And we were also looking for kind of mentions of the state of humanity, of mankind, the kind of societal kind of comment. But also we're looking at like the personal journey, kind of looking in the mirror, kind of seeing your true self, to kind of create an empathy for the clones as well. So that was kind of our short journey into kind of getting a sense of what we wanted from these tracks.
Yeah, I find that story quite interesting in terms of the fact that you're trying to dig deep into not just like the character level, but then also the overall ambience of what that ship looks like as well. I remember that being a really early conversation because, yeah, you didn't want it to be too synthy and too 80s because it almost follows this really traditional sci-fi trope, which is not really part of the storyline, not part of the dynamics that each one of the crew have with each other as well. I thought that was really interesting. And I suppose that from like a pragmatic perspective, and like when we were having this really early conversation at this stage with all of these conditions, talking about, we've kind of understood that we didn't like this, but we did like A, B, and C, and what we're kind of looking for. I do think that one of the biggest things that I noticed in this is when we were initially doing some searches, we were like, there's love themes are so popular, like they're really popular, and there's such a strong contender inside of every genre. Like it just goes everywhere, and to try and find something that doesn't touch about that just makes you realize how many there actually are. But then I suppose that early iteration is actually really helpful because then it means that I think that we came forward courtesy of this first conversations, and we instead of going by genre because that was a bit easy, I think that we gave you a few takes that were like uneasy, and something that was a little bit. We even sort of let down some of the like the 90s, even like trance era stuff, to see if that would tick some of the boxes, because a lot of that thing, they tend to lean further away from lyrics, and perhaps the less lyrics that you have, the more that you can focus on one particular word. And like one of the suggestions from our team was Olives, You're Not Alone,
Yeah,
which like lyrically makes a lot of sense, right?
100%.
And in loads of different aspects, but it didn't quite hit the mark with the overall aesthetic, because as the game goes on, yes, all of this information unfolds, and you need something that's able to tell the story not just at the start, not just at a pivotal point in the middle, and not just afterwards recognizing what the story is, but then also in retrospect. And I think that having something, I think, Barney, you mentioned this a couple of days ago to me, that because the fact it has such a strong and consistent identity, that it doesn't have the same dynamic essence as some other genres would. So I suppose that there was a couple of key tracks that you put forward, that actually one of them was inside of the game in particular, which was the Viagra Boys track, the cognitive hypothesis theory.
Yeah, I mean, no, just going back to what you're saying about the so yeah, love themes. Oh my, isn't there like there's a kind of top 10 of first words in a pop track, and isn't love like first, second, or third, or something like that?
Oh, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. I think it's like really high numbers, more than half for sure. But
but
like I remember it being astronomically high.
it is like hello, I think is quite high as well. But
Oh, really?
the
That makes sense.
yeah, something like that. But the but so we didn't have a love theme per se. We had a paternal love theme. So we had a
Mm.
caring kind of like, a caring sense between three of the characters, and so that was good to dip into. But I think uh yeah, so what, God, I mean, you can have 100 tracks that on paper and the first lyric, etc., 100% they're going to work. And then as soon, and this is like, one of the biggest things I learned a long time ago. In fact, it was on Until Dawn. I had like 20 still images, just storyboard images, and I fed them in, made a video out of them, and then prevised music to the video of still images to help illustrate the point. And it was that's where I learned the power of previs, and where you just get a better sense of that, that positioning, that usage, when you've got it against whatever you have early on. And so, getting a capture, chucking it on the timeline, just very efficiently working through different options and kind of discount,
Mm.
discount, keep, discount, discount, keep. Because we had a lot of tracks. I mean, yeah, we had a lot of tracks. Sorry, going back to the Viagra Boys, yeah, Cognitive Trade-off.
Mm.
That was interesting because that was, I think, one of our strongest choices that had more of a societal comment than a kind of
Yeah.
personal abusive comment.
Mm.
And I think it was quite unique actually on the soundtrack for that reason. We could have lent more into that perhaps, but actually what that track's about, that's is quite rare to find a track
Yes.
about that, not
And
about.
yeah. So linking back to what you were saying, and the rareness of some of these tracks, and the consistency that we want to build, because our prerogative, I suppose, in this was we're trying to look for a common thread amongst all of these rare choices. What is this common theme that can be detailed, that is not so common that it looks like it's wallpapering everything, but they're specific enough that it fulfills like one of the key briefs, which is, and I believe one of the early comments that you made to us was like, what would the crew have genuinely brought on the ship with them? Like, what would be the type of music that they would be listening to? And that actually details really nicely um, the first opening scene. Actually, that's like that. I think that's a great example of what that was, because that's probably the first diegetic uses of music where you were looking at how this is. And to be fair, actually, maybe we should move on to section two, because this all conceptual stuff kind of starts tying into some of these solution stuff.
Shall
So,
I shall I chuck in because we were going to play the trailer, but should we hold on that? You've just mentioned the opening scene, and there's this fantastic Reddit post where someone very efficiently has gone through and broken down all of the kind of foreshadowing of each
oh, really? That's cool.
track. And so
Can you
for
ping
this
that to me?
Yeah.
Later, obviously
Maybe not
after
right
this,
now.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, like this about this track says, "Who Are You Really" by Mickey Echo. This one is the biggest of the bunch in terms of narrative foreshadowing. Obviously, you have the title, "Who Are You Really," a reference to the fact that the characters are not exactly who they think they are, but the lyrics go even further. But and something in this usage as well, and this is interesting from a licensing perspective. So we start diegetic, then we go kind of extra diegetic, pretty much front and center. Then the whole thing stops, and then there's some action, and then it comes back absolutely diegetic, in the world, and they're talking over this track. So shall I throw that in? That's a good illustration of the kind of
Yeah,
thing.
just before that we do,
Yeah.
but that would definitely be the first point. But I just want to talk about like early bits of that framework because in this original brief, we were looking to fulfill some aspects of things. There were a few in-scene moments that we were looking to have diegetic and non-diegetic music placements, but there were also end of chapter moments that we were looking to have music placements in too.
And it's
So
important
the
to differentiate,
combination.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so like we're looking to fulfill both pots, and both pots have to have this consistent like common thread between them, so that it builds a palette. Now, a palette is that we were thinking that it's built off of like an overarching narrative that kind of goes, and obviously I'll dig into that in a little bit later with other placements. But this is one of the in-scene moments, and obviously a very pivotal point because it's so early inside of the game. And one of the early prompts that you gave us as well, Barney, was we would love it if someone was able to listen to this soundtrack the first time round and just think that this is the music they would bring with them. It's kind of authentically placed, like it's real. But then upon the second playthrough, you're like, oh, I see now. And it's like it's almost like you can never really re-listen to this album as if you would the first time because now you know. It's like this permanence aspect of what happens when you have this impact in music. And that was such a key component that makes all of the track selections even rarer. So, and that's good. It doesn't mean they're impossible to find. It just means it's very rewarding when you find the right one. But feel free when you're doing this, Barney, I'll be really interested. And up to you if you want to do this. If you want to, you can occasionally pause it and give commentary on like the changes between, do you know what I mean, and what you were kind of looking for. If you feel it's relevant, I would be really interested in that.
Well, I might just skip it on through the action bit so we get back
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
So
which,
then we
yeah,
get
yeah,
all
for
the
sure.
music. But
Yeah.
but no, it's true. It's true. So to differentiate between the kind of end of chapter, sorry, end of episode, and true kind of in-game sections. The in-game, you're fitting the narrative and the moment. And the end of chapters, you're kind of fitting the narrative kind of only. It is a moment in the narrative, but you're not, it's not like a sync moment. You're not underscoring a scene at that point in time. And also, you're looking for a bit of a refresh. You want people to break out, have something that means something to them, but kind of refreshes them, and then they get back into the kind of true narrative soon after. Let me I'll buzz this in. Let me 1 second.
Oh yeah, please do. Yeah.
Do a share. What I do in this one here. Okay, let's see how this goes.
Come on, VLC.
Shout if it's too quiet.
So you feel entitled to a sense of control and make decisions that you think are your own. You are a stranger here, why have you come? Why have you come? Lift me higher, let me look at the sun. Look at the sun. And once I hear them clearly say, who are you really? Where are you going? Well, I got nothing left to prove, 'cause I got nothing left to lose. See me red my teeth for you.
I really like that. My teeth. Angry. Is that?
Chances are pretty low.
Low, but not zero.
$100 says it's another Java Bean incident.
That was one time.
I really love playing around with diegetic music because you've had it loud just then, so you're really familiarized with it. So the background is still tell the same story.
That's not good.
Complex.
port side. This deck, the whole area has been locked down and sealed.
And that was a really difficult one to figure out actually. I remember that one going back and forth a number of times. It's the opening scene of the game, right? There's so much importance.
So what kind of questions were you asking to yourself when you were inputting that? Like, let's say, I know that you said that you've got the diegetic main sort of opening part, and then obviously there's an action sequence where you're sort of understanding that not everything is as it seems, and then you've layered it sort of lightly into the background. But what were the main questions that you were asking yourself? You know, I know that you just said that there was a lot of things going on.
No, I mean that's totally valid. I mean, this scene actually, in all honesty, was kind of designed by one of the lead designers on the project. They came to us to say, "Look, I think we want the music to do this." I can't remember. It turned into, like everything, it turned into kind of a mutual effort. I can't remember whether this was exactly as was originally designed, or whether we sort of tried the original design and actually flexed it up a bit. I think, but with it where it is now, it's kind of like. You hear the music coming through the door, so you know you're sort of preemptive, you're going to go through there. As you pop through the door, you then want to be immersed with them in the scene, and you're immersed with Sims, tapping on, you know, the game. So you're in with them at that point in time. And then by the time it comes back in and it's backgrounded, you're just giving the sense that it was always just coming from a little speaker in the wall. And you've kind of forgotten that because of that kind of hyper real kind of camera move, etc. That allows you to kind of do a montagey front and center kind of mix with the music. And thankfully it was a set piece, so we could time up against it quite happily, quite easily. So that's good. Yeah, that's the basics really.
That I honestly think that as an opening, I think that does a really good job because obviously implementation, absolutely. And I'm a huge fan of implementation. That's literally all I write about in my Substack as well. It's just loads of implementation stuff, which I find really fascinating because it maketh or breaketh the context, right? But in this instance, because it's the opening scene and because of the fact that one of the key prompts was how can we make it so that when someone replays this mission through, how can they experience it differently now that they know what's coming? And I think, well, my interpretation of the Supermassive games of late have, in the Dark Picture series in particular, have always been this aspect of replayability. Like you want to be able to replay through these scenes to see what else happens in another aspect of things. So being able to re-experience these cutscenes is actually a really big component of what happens and those different iterations. And I know that there's an implementation of this particular music upon a revisit, but
Right.
yeah, we'll come back to that in a later section.
Yeah.
So I guess that what about talking about there's the partnership that we decided to make.
That's
One of the
exactly
early
what I was
conversations,
saying.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
great.
one of the early conversations we were interested in doing was to see if that we can have, we still want to have this sonic identity, but how can we have like a leaned in affiliation with an artist that would be keen to sort of lean in and work with us on various different aspects? And I'm not sure who from your team actually suggested Blood Red Shoes. If it was,
I'll tell you exactly. It was this one I mentioned earlier, the late night deep diving on stuff. And
yeah.
I just I'd not heard of Blood Red Shoes before doing the sleep dive, and since then I've spoken to a number of people. Oh yeah, their stuff was used here, stuff was used there. You know, I'm like fantastic. You know, this is great. But so I started doing a deep dive, and it was one of their most recent albums, the name of which escapes me. But there are a number of tracks from that album which just jumped out, and I'm like, this has got the right. It ticked all the boxes for the lyrics. It ticked all the boxes for attitude as well. Like it kind of had, you know, it had a bit of FU about it. You know, it had a bit of like, you know, I'm not going to stand for that kind of stuff. Which probably brings us as a nice segue to the trailer in a moment. But but it ticked all the boxes. I think we originally had like maybe 3 or 4 tracks from that album that were just like fantastic. You know, this is working for us. But you took that further, and I think that's you know you stepped that up a gear, and we that became just a stronger and stronger partnership, like step by step with Blood Red Shoes with those guys. Yeah, no, over to you.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that suggestion really fit with the album as well. Ghost on Tape was the album.
Thank you.
And it wasn't their latest album. It was actually an album that was done back in 2021, I believe. But the aesthetic of that whole album, even the visual stuff, was actually really quite striking. And it seemed to tick a lot of the boxes for all of the things that we wanted in the concept stage. And even though there could have been some aspect of interpretation about love, a lot of it was about an abusive relationship, which ticked another like big box in what we were looking for as well. And that prompt metaphor was like such a detailer that having let's say one or two of those tracks fit really strongly, we were thinking, well, actually, what else of that ambience and that aesthetic of such a rare pool that we're choosing from, how else can we kind of enhance it? And so after hearing this, I thought, let me get in touch with them. And after assessing their rights, I kind of understood that they looked after their own rights. So, and they have administration deals. So it's like something that they look after themselves. And you know what? They don't have management representation either. So I was able to speak directly with Stephen
All of that
Graham
was
from
so
the band.
lucky, wasn't it? All of that was brilliant. Yeah. We got
Lucky in the
yeah,
sense that the gaming industry and the music industry is quite different. In my interpretation from the music side of things is quite different because the gaming industry have this direct communication with their customers. They're able to speak to them directly. They can get that really enriched feedback directly. But from the music side, there's a lot of layers that come in between where the destination is from this ever growing aspect of different modular requirements of the music industry. And so, yes, you have artists, but then you have managers, live agents, you've got promoters and PR agents and sort of radio pluggers and sync agents and all the rest of it that all kind of have their own different say. And a music team is often made of a team of different annex people, but a game team is a game team, if that makes sense. That's kind of the way that I see that. So in the sense that
yeah, exactly.
you might have some management that are really complicit and also that might be gaming native and understand the value of that that partnership, and those are great conversations to have in particular, because a lot of the language that you can use is quite mutual and you can shortcut a lot of the explanations and conversations as well. But in this case, it's funny because Stephen had admittedly said he's not much of a gamer actually, but then as I was getting to know him and sort of spending some time sort of speaking him through what I was doing and what I was up to, I think that he really liked the rich authenticity for this type of medium. And Laura, the other band member, was familiar with our series and was really interested to learn more. And I think that this iterative conversation that was started initially was just their willingness to be complicit and their willingness to investigate something that they hadn't really explored before, but then also to be really excited about this world. And as they were speaking to some of their own fans were fans of the Dark Pictures series, and they were like, oh, this is really interesting. There's so much symbiosis between not just our aesthetic, but also this parallel direction that our fandom is going with this game, which is one of the biggest answers to the biggest question between music and gaming, is that how do you create that bridge without even having to use language in the first place? And I think it's about selection of choice and how to narrate that in a certain way. And I ended up asking them, I wonder if you've got anything that you've written for this album that you may not have used for the album, because that's quite a common thing, that a lot of artists end up writing a lot amount and then condensing it into a product and then having some offcuts. And they sent over, actually, they did have a track in particular that was written at the same time as the album that they never finished. And they sent it over to us, and we thought it was great. But
it was an immediate banger. It was an immediate banger. We're like,
yeah, it was.
yeah,
It made so much sense to what was missing.
Yeah.
For what we were looking for, and it was like gold mine. Do you know what I mean? Absolute gold mine. And situations like that, like Barney, they're rare, man. Everything's rare here. Do you know what I mean? It's really rare, but
no, I
it's
mean,
worth asking the question, I think.
well, no, I mean that's what I'm always enamored by about the way you guys work and you work is and this is something I said to you a million times, like, you know, I don't know how you sell what you do to people to get the business in, because it's just so varied and it really is on a case by case. But what I love about that is the knowledge that everything is up for negotiation. Like, don't be shy on suggesting, you know, maybe that person has a different angle on what you're suggesting, etc. And with regards to partnership and how that grew, it just, you know, there's a bit of me that would have liked to have explored that even more for this game. You know, I think we could have, you know, should have, you know, all of that. Maybe look for more bespoke pieces, or you know, etc., etc., and or, you know, worked more closely with Blood Red Shoes on that, because they did a fantastic job. In fact, you know, we got to the point where they were super interested. we wanted to make sure they had as much information as possible. So they came and visited, and we sat them down with the creative director and just got everyone talking. And I remember at the end of the meeting, it was just, again, that symbiosis, the synchronicity. At the end of the meeting, I think, so we said, sorry, is everyone happy? Everyone feel like they've got what they need from this, And I remember Laura, who was, starting to obviously think about lyrics, etc., was just like, yeah, this is exactly what I write about, abusive relationships. It was like spot on. Yeah.
So we just got a question in, by the way, real quick,
Yeah.
Which is Blur Shoes representing themselves, how would it different with achieving the same sort of thing if there was a management and labels involved? I think that management as an added layer, it is really contextual in its own nature, but a lot of the time a management should be trying to enrich the services and providing access and routes in to make sure these conversations go even further. So actually the net benefit of management is that they're supposed to be there to encourage things that they think that are correct. So a good manager would have identified this as being like a really good fit and a good opportunity, and probably would have nurtured it from a business perspective inside of everything else that is being created. And it just so happened that we were able to nurture that as people that were outside of management, but obviously this is kind of in parallel with what we do. So ours is more from like, this is a requirement and we made that conversation happen, but a management in theory would be doing it from the other side. So they would be, how can we best manifest this in the other direction, and then we'd meet on that conversation. So it's not even the fact that it would be like easier or harder, it's more the fact that you should actually have an extra annex person that's looking out for things if you find it of interest, or even someone that has their own specialist knowledge skill. They can then say, oh, this is something that might be of interest for you to discuss. Is this something that you're interested in, and then to pursue it on that angle? Because obviously I used to do management, and you answer to the artist. That's your exactly, an extra advocate. Spot on. But in terms of that partnership, it was great, the fact that they lent in and they were really interested, even amongst the fact that they were further from like the domain knowledge, linguistic stuff. But that's the main thing. I think that there's a lot of benefits you can when you lean in and lean out. So we ended up using like quite a few of those tracks from that album, including a track for the trailer, which, I mean, the trailer did some serious numbers, to be fair, and there was a lot of commentary that created a lot of discussion between the artist and the game and that as well. So Barney, give it a spin, man. Let's give it a spin.
Give it some. Okay, I'm just lining up. Yeah, sorry, you heard that kick in, didn't you?
No, it's all good. It's all right.
Right, let me just share this in. Okay, I'll just mute myself.
18.
It's me! You gotta let me in! They're right behind me! Open the fucking door! You can't leave me out here! Please!
You gotta make a choice.
Fuck you! Fuck you!
Goddamn step.
It's me, please.
Better be a fucking alien.
Leave me out here, please!
The question is, what are you going to do about it?
Very, very cool. I mean, lyrically, so simple, but makes so much sense to both sides of the story. So before understanding what the true essence is, and both afterwards. But then also sonically, aesthetically fitting that as well, and therefore was a great keyhole, because that's what a trailer is a keyhole into the game, isn't it? And I think it's just a fantastic keyhole. So from a selector from your part for what you guys wanted to do, great.
It was. I've just noticed even actually that's kind of from there's probably something that publishing understood it to be that I didn't. Was because it all of our games we offer. Everyone can die, everyone can survive. It's about dilemma choices, about significant choice, etc., and also rewinding, as you mentioned earlier nowadays. But that whole thing is about you can go either way, and it's about rebellion if you want to go that way. Well, so in fact it's got for a trailer, it's got a lot of choice element in it as well, which kind of fits the kind of meta game of the Dark Pictures as well, which is interesting.
Yeah, the metagame, that's interesting actually.
Well, the high level, right? It's like
Yeah, and I think that's what I really like about the Dark Pictures series in particular, is the fact that there can be some turns, not to obviously give loads of stuff away from previous games and stuff, but there's often a lot of turns, and I think that having a way that the replayability seems to be a really big factor here, but just that also builds in with the Sonic identity too. I think that to go back all the way to the concept stage really quickly, I think that all of these little pieces of information that you and your team and the team are beyond that were interested in, that you found valuable, all had to be under consideration. And if anything sounds a bit wild, it's probably not wild, it's probably helpful. And that helps determine things that we know exactly what can be and what can't be true. And us having to send over loads of players and it being a load of no's is not a problem. Like, if anything, it's a good thing. You shut every single door until you find the right ones that you can open, and the more time you have to iterate, the better, isn't? So that's kind of. It's nice the fact that band has been in there for a few times for different sort of end of scenes, as well as having the custom track for the end credits. But then also being part of the trailer is quite rich experience for them as an artist to be involved with them. And they've had loads of positive responses from their audience that were Dark Pictures fans as well, which is really cool. So it was a really good match ultimately.
I've just dropped a link for Dead Air, the end credit track, into the chat. I was opening it up on Spotify because I realised I haven't got anywhere sort of playbackable easily. But I just dropped a link in there so people can listen to the bespoke track that Blood Red Shoes, did for us, which was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it was straight banger. In terms of, I'll go into troubleshooting bit here because we're kind of doing everything and whatever random mod that we like, and then we'll come on to one of the key scenes as well. But just before that we do, so we had 3 in-scene moments, and the second in-scene moment, we were finding a lot of difficulty with how that we were gonna, what track that we were gonna choose, particularly for the scene. It was a diegetic moment. There was some engineering, and then something occurs. And we couldn't really find out what to do. So instead of us choosing from a licensed perspective, we ended up having one of our teammates that was actually Tessa Obscura wrote like a sci-fi piece specifically for that moment. And that was handy because we knew that we were eligible for doing that. And I'll talk about the licensing framework later, but we made sure that we were able to do that if that was the case. But having backups to solve problems, that was quite handy. But that was the second instance of where there was. And then just to quickly touch on the difference between licensing and composition, I want to give a massive shout out to Jason Graves, by the way, who did all the compositional element. Like the fact that he was the guy that did Dead Space originally, but then has obviously done loads of stuff since, and like that, the work that he's done in between connecting all of these dots was important for us to recognize and to understand initially. Anyway, the fact that was the case, because we kind of to get ideas of what he was deciding to go down and to write helped us choose what our aesthetic looks like so we can complement it a little bit more. But yeah, he's untouchable.
It was a good division there. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've been working with Jason for about 10 years now. We've got non-verbal communication down. I remember actually in the early days, he'd do a piece, he'd send it over to me, and I'd just reply LISI, love it, stem it, just yep, brilliant. Give me stuff, I need it now. So we had a really efficient. No, Jason's incredible. Loads of different styles. We pushed into some different areas on this one, and going back to the kind of synth discussions and the kind of synth wave. We knew we wanted so I'm going to dive into this now. We knew we wanted like the hybrid soundtrack from the OST, from the score. And hybrid's nothing new, and it's nothing new to Jason either, but it's a sliding scale. You can have barely orchestral, or you can have barely synth. and getting them to gel, that's where the artistry is. And I think I can't remember if it was around the same time, but I'd watched the opening of June, and there's a single held note which I couldn't tell. I think at some point in time it crossfades from kind of string cluster, very high string cluster, into a synth, or the other way round. I can't remember which way round it is, but it's barely, and so I kind of had that in my mind. And Jason just delivered. I mean, absolutely, and beyond. There was, with regards to the kind of discussions about synthwave, there were certain synths we found as no-goes, like 303 kind of squidgy acid. It's, on paper it would work 100 times over, but again, it's too stylized, too very much of a kind of an era. Acid house days, late 80s, etc., that kind of thing. So the synths that were chosen were kind of like, very sharp, kind of acerbic, kind of nasty. We wanted the soundtrack to be kind of nasty, and this is the corporate element kind of overbearing, and in fact the challenge that all the characters are going to have. So we were talking early on, and I had a dream come true. I was like, can you use a Nord lead in the can you just slip and of course he did. It's fantastic. That was about my only input. The rest of it was pretty much all him. He had some incredible, so he had some Junos in there, and a few others, and so it was the most synth heavy, and in fact early on a lot of the direction which kind of shifted slightly was we wanted to bring a lot of kind of cosmic horror into it. We wanted it to be slightly bigger than the kind of narrative at certain times. And actually, we did subdue that a little bit as time went on, whether rightly or wrongly. That was kind of the path we took. But no, yeah, Jason did an incredible job. And one last thing on the soundtrack, the diegetic, non-diegetic. So I try and mess around with this. In previous games, we've had a gramophone playing a classical piece, Schubert, for example, and it starts in world, and so you can hear it kind of down a corridor. And then as the scene progresses, we, in real time and interactively, move that track to be full kind of score, and then support it with aleatoric elements, atonal elements from Jason's score as well, to further enhance the kind of horror. That's what we've done in previous games, a number of other different things as well. So we were like, okay, what are we going to do on this game? Now, there's a number of scenes based in a piano bar, and we already had the main theme for these characters. We called it the Young theme. It was about this sort of paternal love triangle between Stafford, Mitchell, and Young, and we already had the main sort of orchestral theme. And we had this idea. It's like, well, they're in a piano bar. It's only them in the piano bar. What if we had a piano jazz diegetic? The main theme could then emanate from non-diegetically. So that's what we did. So I had a chat with Jason. I said, okay, here's an idea. Can you give me a piano jazz accompaniment to that entire orchestral theme you've done already?
No way. Did he do that?
Yeah. He went, yes.
No way. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he's like, yeah, no problem. Yeah, we got that. So he also got a couple of people in. There was an entire percussion piece to that we can use. But anyway, so because we just couldn't find a place. It was all great stuff. So the result of that in the game is you cuts to inside the piano bar. There's a piano on the left, and it's playing the piano. And as the scene progresses, and we're doing like an on-beat or on-bar transition, the diegetic piano has these strings and full orchestral kind of with synths as well. Sorry, the hybrid score emanates from that piano, all in time, all in key, all in structure, as per the choices you're making and how the conversation's going. And then it goes back to just the piano in the corner again as well. And I hope no one notices it, because I hope it's just smooth. Do you know what I mean?
I hate to say it, but like on my playthrough, and I was really listening intently for all of this, I didn't notice that.
Good.
But what I love about integration is when you don't notice stuff. I think that's a firm achievement if you're able to not notice something, and it kind of like just slides into purview. I guess the difficulty when it comes to is licensed music is that it tends to cut through because it's quite clearly diegetic, or the fact that it has a front place inside of a cutscene. But then with compositional, to be able to hide in those little instances, like optional music, hidden music, for me is like so valuable, because it touches your subconscious and it brings you to where you want it to be. And it's a little bit like, I suppose this might be a bit of a reach, but sometimes in some like club music from 2010s, it has this white riser that goes whoosh, and like it's only built in there to make it seem like something's expanding outside of there. But like an ordinary listener would never be able to spot that. But every time I hear that, I'm a bit like, it's like a kettle boiling in the other room now. But like, it was really annoying that someone identified that to me. But before then, it was just like, I was quite happy for it to just give me that vibe. Do you know what I mean? I thought that we could move on to the big scene, if you would be keen for such a thing.
The what? Sorry.
The big pivotal
that
cut
one.
scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd
Do you
be
want
very
to
happy
give
to.
any sort of requirements, or like the backstory of what you and the team were trying to detail with this?
Preamble, yeah. I mean, this is the turning point of the whole game. So this is the biggest spoiler. Anyone who's concerned about that, that's fine. Jump off. But so it's the turning point of the whole game. It's the big reveal. There was this one was really interesting actually. I've got to give a shout out to a track that we didn't end up using, but was really touching. There was a music event in Guildford that I went to, and an artist called Aisha Vaughan did a basically solo kind of rendition of Toy Soldiers, which I think was composed for the game Toy Soldiers. And that didn't put me off potentially using it, because it was just amazing, just really haunting. And that fitted the bill for all of our lyrics, right? There's no love in it. It's about this, you're in an abusive relationship. You're sent to, it's basically a story of infantry. You're sent over the top. You get almost guaranteed death. It's horrific. And in a solo female voice, it was incredibly tingling. Think about it now. You're saying it. So that's what. But that was the kind of embodiment of what we were trying to, the kind of the tragedy. The realization of the tragedy, but there was also some additional meanings. That the situation kind of gave. There was kind of an association with that kind of extending the metaphor, maybe too far, who knows? But in our own lives, our experiences are shaped by our environment. Are any of us original? There's kind of existential kind of questions and metaphors as well. That kind of it lent into this. So it was a very poignant moment, and we spent a lot of time experimenting with different tracks for it, actually, and there's been a lot of good feedback in reviews for the choice we made, which is great. I think there were some other choices on the table as well, and without going too deep into them, and we were talking about this before, is it some sort of bias? But some that we didn't choose, I've heard in a lot of memes, in a lot of shorts and social clips, etc. And I can't decide whether it's better to have had something more original, or it's better to have had something that's more out there and kind of in the zeitgeist, or maybe that's the wrong question. I'm not sure.
Oh, I mean, that's such a big question, actually, from a creative perspective. But the thing is that in retrospect, there has not been another use of this track inside of a game prior to, funnily enough, Mixtape that came out 5 days beforehand, which is the only thing. But then before then, obviously we're not sort of aware of what that was the case at the time. But yeah, otherwise it would be the second ever usage, but we want to know that anyway. But there's loads of different choices that we had with this, and I suppose one of the things I remember speaking to yourself and Will about Early Doors was that the way that I had interpreted this and from a while back was that you've got a really strong aesthetic that we've been discussing this whole time, and it's all been this aesthetic about which has to map in with the trailer, which is to lead everyone in a particular direction. That aesthetic is soundtracking the crew, so whatever happens during that time, they have to keep that aesthetic trailer aesthetic. Do you know what I mean? It's quite consistent. It's the music they would bring with them as part of their identity, right? However, that has all been to do with this concept of the mimic and the alien, and that's been really clear inside of all of this. But this is a completely different storyline, And therefore, I feel like because it's a different storyline, it kind of deserved to have its own soundtrack. So in its own light, this cutscene is one element of another soundtrack that just touches this game and then leaves again. And what I quite like about that is the fact that after that happens, all of the music from that point onwards changes as well. It becomes a little bit more sullen, a little bit more darker, a little bit more grittier, a little bit slower paced. Everything like the drums slap a little bit more. Everything's dragged out. It's a little bit more kind of, are you really going to make a little bit less optimistic? In the beginning, it was a bit like ignorance is bliss, but then after that moment, the same music aesthetic was a little bit different, a little bit darker. So, I mean, it felt like all of the choices that we were putting forward had that in mind. It was like, how do we find something that it's still in keeping in the same world and the same universe, but it's not part of that same album. You know, it can't be the same part of the album. It has to be so different, and it has to capture that emotion, but then also have whatever you would want to describe as impact, right? And for us, it's like, how can this track come in, say what it needs to say, and then change everything after it? And I think that, mutually we did a good job on that. Like, yeah,
That's
feel free
great.
to give that.
Listening to what you're saying there, I'm sort of thinking, damn, yeah, we should have put some of those earlier tracks actually in after that point in time, so that they could have that second meaning, to sort of further reinforce that point. Maybe it would have been too much. Who knows?
I think it still happened. It still happened. And if you look at the bias of the tracks before and after, that I think that was succeeded.
Nice.
So, yeah,
Should we
feel
drop it
free to
in?
give that. So, yeah, do it. Yeah, let's have a look.
Okay, I got lined up. Give me a second.
Maybe until they start, because I'm just aware of time. Maybe just until they start walking across the thing.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. So, I mean, if anyone really is concerned about spoilers, now really is the time to duck out. That's for sure.
This planet is alive. It's destroying us one by one. I'm sending you our coordinates now. Please, you need to save us. Get us off Tau Ceti.
Holy shit.
You need to get away from Tau Ceti. It's too late for me, but you can save the Andromeda. I can't let you risk your crew for me. Please, turn around, please.
Oh my god. What the fuck?
Can't anybody see? You've got a war to fight. Never find a way, regardless of what they say. How can it feel this wrong? From this moment, how can it feel
It doesn't make sense.
this wrong?
Those ships, they're all ours.
How is that possible? We were the first here.
Then who did this? Corinth.
They did send ships before us. What do you mean? Is that us?
To myself, I got nobody on my side. Surely that ain't
The probe has message logs. Half a dozen of them.
Yeah, big.
No, I
Big.
just realised. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like everything's connected and it's connected for a reason. I realize that we're really close on time. Leo, I
Yes.
don't know, suppose if you want us to, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to come them through right now. But then if not, we can sort of, I guess, wrap up some thoughts about what we had. And but Leo, otherwise,
Yeah, no, I'll keep an eye on the chat, no problem. I think it was almost quite difficult to say anything after that last video, actually. So yeah, out of, not to go too deep onto spoiler territory, but out of pure curiosity, I mean, how far into the game does that sort of moment take place? Is it sort of fairly sort of two-thirds of the way through, three-quarters?
Let's
It is a
go
real
two
massive
thirds, I think.
tonal
Yeah,
shift, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Something like 2/3, I think.
Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's so interesting to hear you sort of, grappling with sort of context around sort of lyrics, as well as sort of the general sort of ambient themes that you're sort of aiming for. I think that's really, really interesting. And I think as well, sort of latching on to artists that are in, current artists that are in the current zeitgeist I would say, sort of quite a bold move, especially for something that's set so far into the future, obviously. Yeah, by all means, those are just my sort of my thoughts on this. It's fascinating. It really is very interesting.
There's a really interesting metaphor within that, actually. I've got the Kae Tempest statue in the square. It's no secret we had a delayed release on this game. That was released 2/3, three-quarters way through last year. I heard it first, BBC Radio 6. I'm just like, oh my God, that's brilliant. So to extend this, you know how sci-fi can extend metaphors into different races. There's interesting journeys as well that other people have been on, and those lyrics, I think, had a real depth of meaning, actually. So yeah, a current artist or not, if it fits well, it's it's perfect.
Yeah, I think that cultural, artistic, lyrical, sonic fit, and all of those elements. I mean, it's a little bit like when you're completing a musical track. Like, at what point in time do you put tools down and say, right, we found a perfect track, we can export it now, and we're good to go? I think that every musician's probably faced the same quandary, which is it's never ready, it's never good to go. And like, the more time that you can put into finding out what would be a better and better fit, then the better it becomes. But at this point in time, with all of the effort and time we collectively put into finding what this looks like, I think that having a really strong conceptual stage, and then having enough time to be able to iterate what this kind of looks like, being able to framework it out into different compartments, and then sort of move it forward from there, and having the right relationships to be able to sort of nurture that, and to build it all in a direction, and to make it iterative, that's the best way to kind of put it. Eventually everyone lands in a decision that feels the most right at the right time, and as long as it's unified and it supports the wider series of the game, then it gets, I guess, positive thoughts. Do you know what I mean? So but yeah, hats off to you, Barney, and the team. And
No,
yeah,
it was,
did a great
it was
job.
a mutual. Well, it was a mutual job, and this is the one thing I wanted to say within this was, I know we spoke about this before, but so I never like turning up to a meeting stupid, but I don't want to start a partnership with a dogma, and so the musical brief, the commercial brief was like, this is what I think, and there's room within that for other people's input, for your input, why would I be coming to you guys if it wasn't for your input, and you did a fantastic job. You brought some big stuff, some big hitting stuff to the table, which was great. So yeah, hats off.
I appreciate it, man. And,
Yeah, big time.
And Leo, thanks for having us. I think that we've hit the timer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really, really fascinating listening to this sort of sonic, well, not just a sonic journey, but journey in music alongside the development of the game. I think it's been really, really interesting, and I think as well, sort of demonstrating that what is available out there. You can work with current artists, you can work with licensing music, you can help sort of put together your own sort of spins on things and everything, and create some original pieces. But yeah, it is a really, really fascinating element to games, and as you and I have always said, Kenny, I think music can absolutely make a game, and it can really lift that anyone's experience of it, and it's got such fantastic potential as well when it's married up correctly. So yeah, fantastic stuff. Tremendous. Well, thank you so much, Kenny and Barney. This has been really, really interesting. I'll make a recording available. I'll pop your details down, Kenny, so people can reach out to you. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and hopefully we'll hear some more about this all soon. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks so
Thanks, Tom.
much.
Cheers, Leo.